The sound cut through the African night like a blade through silk, high-pitched, desperate, achingly small. A mewing cry that should have been answered by a mother's reassuring rumble, but met only with silence. In the pale moonlight of the Eastern Cape, a tiny white shape huddled against the red earth, pelage so bright it glowed like a beacon for every predator within hunting distance. 3 weeks old, barely 2 kilograms, eyes still clouded with the blue of infancy. The cub's name would later be Atlas, but on that night, he was simply a mistake of genetics. A white lion, beautiful and doomed, abandoned by the very mother who should have protected him because nature is cruel in its practicality. White fur means no camouflage. No camouflage means failed hunts. Failed hunts mean a starving pride. And a pride cannot afford weakness, not even when that weakness wears the face of their own blood. The little cub cried again, his voice growing weaker as dehydration claimed what little strength remained in his tiny body. Dr. Hendrik van der Merwe would later say that finding Atlas alive was nothing short of miraculous. The conservationist had been conducting a routine night patrol of the Lionheart Wildlife Sanctuary's northern sector when his vehicle's spotlight caught that impossible flash of white against the darkness. At first, he thought perhaps it was a piece of discarded cloth, or maybe a young impala separated from its herd. But then the cloth moved. It cried. And Hendrik's heart, hardened by 30 years of wildlife conservation and all the death that profession demands you witness, cracked clean open. If you are watching this story unfold and feeling the weight of what it means, when nature's own rules are broken by something as simple as love, then you are exactly the kind of person who makes Wild Heart Stories possible. Every subscription to this channel helps us share more impossible moments like this one. More stories that prove family is not about biology, but about who stays when staying is the hardest thing in the world. Hit that subscribe button because Atlas's story is only beginning, and what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about the bonds between species. This is a community that believes in the extraordinary, and we need you in it. Hendrik was 61 years old, weathered by the sun, bent slightly at the shoulders from decades of fieldwork. His hands, scarred and capable, trembled as he lifted the tiny cub from the ground. The animal was so light, so impossibly fragile. Its breathing came in shallow gasps, eyes crusted with discharge, ribs visible beneath the white fur like prison bars containing a failing heart. He had seen this before, dozens of times. Cubs rejected for being runts, for being sick, for reasons only the mother knew. Usually you let nature take its course. That is the rule. That is what conservation means, letting the wild remain wild even when every instinct in your human heart screams to intervene. But this was a white lion. A genetic rarity so precious that fewer than 13 existed in the wild across all of Africa. And more than that, more than the statistics and the conservation value, this was a baby who had done nothing wrong except be born different. Hendrik made his decision in the space between one heartbeat and the next. He would not let nature take this course. He would break the rules. He would try. The drive back to the sanctuary's main compound took 40 minutes along rutted dirt roads. Hendrik kept the cub inside his jacket, pressed against his chest, trying to share body heat with a creature whose internal temperature was dropping toward the point of no return. He radioed ahead to his assistant, Maria, asking her to prepare formula, heating pads, antibiotics, the equipment for saving a life that should already be lost. Maria's voice crackled back through the radio with questions he did not have time to answer. "Just prepare everything," he told her. "We are bringing home something impossible." The compound was small, functional, built for purpose rather than comfort. Solar panels on the roof, rain collection barrels by each building, everything designed to minimize the human footprint while maximizing the ability to help wounded or orphaned wildlife return to their natural habitat. Hendrik's personal quarters were slightly larger than the staff housing, not because of rank, but because he lived there with Thor and Luna, his dogs, his partners, his family. Thor was a Rottweiler, 4 years old, 55 kilograms of muscle and intelligence, bred for protection and loyalty. His coat was the classic black and rust, glossy with health. His eyes a warm brown that could shift to amber when the light hit them just right. He'd been trained from puppyhood not just as a guard dog, but as a companion, someone who could patrol the sanctuary's vast 2,000 hectares and alert Hendrik to anything unusual. Poachers, injured animals, breaches in the natural fencing that kept the wildlife contained but free. Thor was not aggressive by nature, but he was authoritative. He knew his job. He took it seriously. Luna was 3 years old, 45 kilograms, Thor's mate, though they had never bred. Her coat was slightly darker, her build more compact, her personality softer around the edges. Where Thor led, Luna supported. Where Thor enforced, Luna comforted. She had been trained primarily for companionship, but had proven herself invaluable during medical procedures, her presence calming to frightened animals in ways no human could replicate. Together, the two Rottweilers were Hendrik's constant shadows, sleeping in his bedroom, riding in his vehicle, walking beside him through terrain that could kill a careless human in minutes. When Hendrik pushed open the door to his quarters that night, both dogs rose from their beds immediately, alert but not alarmed. They knew his footstep, his scent, the particular way he moved when he was tired versus when he was urgent. Tonight, he was both. He was also carrying something that made their nostrils flare with interest, something small, something alive, something that smelled like cat. Hendrik moved slowly, speaking in the calm, low voice he used for sensitive situations. "Easy," he told them. "Easy now. I need your help." Thor's ears went forward, his entire body focused. Luna tilted her head, that universal dog gesture of confusion mixed with curiosity. Hendrik knelt down, still cradling the cub inside his jacket, and let the dogs approach. Thor reached him first, nose working overtime, processing the incredible amount of information contained in scent. Cat, baby cat, sick baby cat, feline, yes, but more than that. Lion. This was a lion cub. Every instinct in Thor's body understood the hierarchy of the animal kingdom. Lions were apex predators. Lions were dangerous. Lions were not something you bring into your home. A low rumble started in his chest, not quite a growl, but a question, a concern. Luna pushed past Thor's shoulder, gentler in her approach, and Hendrik slowly opened his jacket to reveal the tiny white face inside. The cub's eyes were barely open, filmed with sickness, but they tracked movement. They saw Luna, and something in that moment, some invisible communication that happened below the level of human comprehension, passed between the dog and the cub. Luna's tail, which had been still with uncertainty, began to wag, just slightly, just enough. She leaned in and licked the cub's face, once, twice, cleaning away the crust around his eyes with the efficiency of a mother who had done this 1,000 times before, though Luna had never had puppies of her own. The cub made a sound, not quite a cry, but not quite a purr either. Something in between, something that said please, something that said help. Thor watched this exchange, his rumble fading, his posture relaxing degree by careful degree. If Luna accepted this strange creature, then perhaps it was acceptable. Luna's judgment had never been wrong before. Thor moved closer, added his own inspection, his own scent marking, his own tentative welcome. And just like that, without ceremony or fanfare, Atlas became part of the pack. The first 72 hours were critical. Hendrik set up a makeshift nursery in his bedroom, knowing the cub needed constant warmth and monitoring. He fed Atlas every 2 hours with a bottle, Special formula designed for big cats, watching the tiny creature suckle with desperate determination. Between feedings, Atlas slept. But he did not sleep alone. Thor and Luna, without any instruction from Hendrik, positioned themselves on either side of the heating pad where the cub lay, creating a warm corridor of living flesh that regulated temperature better than any artificial system could manage. Hendrik would wake for the night feedings to find Thor's massive head resting inches from Atlas's tiny body, the dogs breathing slow and steady, a living metronome of safety. Luna would be curled on the other side, her body forming a C shape that cradled without crowding. And in the middle, this impossible white scrap of life, growing stronger by the day. By the end of the first week, Atlas had gained 0.5 kilogram. His eyes cleared. His cry grew louder, more demanding. He began to explore his limited world, wobbling on legs still too weak to support him properly. And that was when the real education began. Cubs learn boundaries from their mothers and pride mates. They learn through play that is not quite play, through discipline that is not quite punishment, through the 1,000 small corrections that teach a young predator how to exist in a world of hierarchies and rules. Atlas had none of that. He had Thor and Luna, and they, with a patience that seemed almost supernatural, began to teach him. The first lesson came when Atlas, growing bolder with health, attempted to bite Luna's ear. Not in aggression, but in play, the way any kitten might. But Atlas was not a kitten, and even at 4 weeks old, his teeth were sharper than any dog's, his jaw pressure stronger than it had any right to be. Luna tolerated the first bite, the second. On the third, she turned her head and delivered a sharp bark directly into Atlas's face. Not loud enough to truly frighten, but firm enough to startle. Atlas froze, released her ear, looked at her with those cloudy blue eyes that were just beginning to clear into gold. Luna stared back unblinking until Atlas lowered his head, tucked his chin, the universal feline gesture of submission. Only then did Luna lick his head, forgiveness given as quickly as the correction. Lesson learned. Thor, watching from his position by the door, rumbled his approval. As weeks turned into months, these lessons multiplied. When Atlas tried to eat before the dogs, Thor would block him with his body, standing firm until Atlas sat and waited. When Atlas played too rough, Luna would pin him with her weight, holding him down until he stopped struggling and went limp with acceptance. When Atlas cried for attention at inappropriate times, both dogs would simply ignore him until he learned that noise without purpose earned nothing but solitude. It was not cruelty, it was teaching, it was love in the form of boundaries. And Atlas, with the adaptability of youth and the desperate need of an orphan, absorbed every lesson like water into sand. By 8 weeks, Atlas weighed 7 kilograms and was nearly as tall as Luna when sitting. His white coat had grown thick and healthy. His eyes had cleared to a brilliant amber gold, and his mew had deepened into something that hinted at the roar to come. He moved with more confidence now, exploring the quarters, the porch, the immediate grounds around Hendrik's building. Always with Thor and Luna flanking him, always under their supervision. Hendrik documented everything with photographs and notes, knowing this was unprecedented. A white lion cub, rejected by his pride, adopted by dogs, treated as pack rather than prey, learning canine body language and social structures as though they were his native tongue. It should not work. By every rule of biology and behavior, it should fail spectacularly. But it did not fail. It thrived. At 3 months old, Atlas weighed 15 kilograms and stood nearly as tall as Luna at the shoulder. His baby teeth were falling out, being replaced by the adult versions that would eventually grow into fangs capable of crushing bone. His paws, once tiny and delicate, were expanding into the massive platforms that would support his adult weight. Everything about him screamed his heritage. This was a lion, a predator, an animal designed by millennia of evolution to hunt, to kill, to dominate. And yet when Thor barked a command, Atlas obeyed. When Luna corrected him, Atlas submitted. When Hendrik called for feeding time, Atlas waited until both dogs had eaten before approaching his own meal. The hierarchy was crystal clear. Thor was alpha, Luna was beta. Atlas, despite his growing size and strength, was omega, the lowest in the pack, the one who followed rather than led. Hendrik worried about this sometimes, late at night when he could not sleep. What would happen when Atlas grew larger than the dogs? When his strength became undeniable? When his instincts, buried but not erased, began to surface? Would the hierarchy hold? Could it hold? Or would nature eventually reassert itself in blood and tragedy? The moment that crystallized these fears came on a hot afternoon when Atlas was just over 4 months old. He weighed 20 kilograms now, big enough that when he stood on his hind legs, he could rest his paws on Hendrik's chest. His mane was beginning to grow in, a pale gold fuzz around his face that would eventually become the magnificent crown of adulthood. He was playing with a rubber toy, one of Luna's favorites, shaking it with growing violence, small growls rumbling in his chest. Thor approached, calm and measured as always, and reached for the toy. It was time for the evening patrol and toys needed to be put away. A routine they had done 100 times before. But this one time, Atlas did not want to let go. He pulled back. Thor pulled forward. And Atlas, in a moment of instinct or stubbornness or perhaps just teenage defiance, curled his lip back and produced a sound that was no longer a kitten's hiss. It was a growl. Small, yes. Immature, certainly. But unmistakably a warning, a challenge, a statement that said mine. Thor went completely still. The playful energy that usually characterized their interactions evaporated like water on hot stone. His ears went forward, his eyes locked onto Atlas with an intensity that Hendrik had rarely seen. And then Thor moved, not in anger, but in absolute authority. He did not strike, did not bite, did not do anything that could be called violent. He simply advanced, 1 step, 2 steps, 3, walking directly at Atlas with the kind of purposeful movement that brooks no argument. Atlas, perhaps recognizing he had crossed an invisible line, dropped the toy, backed up, but Thor kept coming, kept walking forward until Atlas's hindquarters hit the porch wall and there was nowhere left to retreat. Only then did Thor stop, his face inches from Atlas's, his body language screaming dominance without needing to touch the younger animal at all. Atlas went down, belly to the ground, ears flat, throat exposed. Every line of his body radiated submission, apology, recognition that he had been wrong. Thor held the position for 5 long seconds, 10, 15, long enough to burn the lesson into memory. Then, and only then, did Thor back up. Picked up the toy with his mouth, walked away to place it in its container, the message delivered, the hierarchy reaffirmed. Hendrik, who had watched the entire exchange with his hand on the tranquilizer gun he always kept nearby, released a breath he had not known he was holding. Luna, from her position in the doorway, wagged her tail once. Approval given, crisis averted. Atlas remained on the ground for another full minute before slowly, carefully rising to his feet. He did not approach Thor, did not try to reclaim the toy. Instead, he walked to Luna and pressed his head against her shoulder, seeking comfort, seeking forgiveness, seeking the reassurance that he was still part of the pack despite his mistake. Luna licked his ear. All was forgiven. But Hendrik knew, watching them, that this was only the beginning. Atlas was growing. His strength was increasing daily, and the question that haunted every quiet moment remained unanswered, heavy as stone, sharp as teeth. When Atlas weighed 250 kilograms and could kill either dog with a single swipe of his paw, would he still remember to submit? Would love and learned behavior be enough to override nature's most basic programming? Or would Hendrik wake one morning to find that the impossible experiment had ended the only way it ever could, in blood and regret, and the knowledge that some boundaries are written too deep in DNA to ever truly erase? Time moves differently in the wild. Seasons blend into each other, marked not by calendars, but by rains and dry spells, by migrations and births, by the eternal cycle of growth and death that governs all living things. For Atlas, time meant transformation. The tiny white cub who had once fit inside Hendrik's jacket became something else entirely, something magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. At 8 months old, Atlas weighed 60 kilograms. His shoulders were broader than Luna's entire body. His paws, massive and powerful, left prints in the red earth that looked like they belonged to a creature from mythology rather than flesh and blood reality. His mane was growing in thick and golden, a crown that caught sunlight and turned it into something close to holy. He was beautiful, he was deadly, and he was still impossibly submissive to 2 dogs who barely reached his chest when standing. The morning routine never changed. Hendrik would wake at dawn, the African sun just beginning to paint the horizon in shades of orange and pink. He would prepare breakfast for all 3 animals, the same as he had done since that first night when Atlas arrived more dead than alive. Thor's bowl first, filled with high-quality kibble, supplemented with meat scraps from the previous day's butchering. Then Luna's bowl, identical in content, but slightly smaller in portion. And finally, Atlas's portion, which had grown from bottle feedings to bowls to entire haunches of meat as his size demanded more fuel for his expanding frame. But the order never varied. Thor ate first, always. The big Rottweiler would approach his bowl with calm dignity, take his time, chew thoroughly. Luna would wait her turn, sitting with perfect patience, her eyes occasionally flicking to Atlas to make sure the young lion remembered his place. And Atlas, despite the fact that he could smell the meat, despite the fact that his stomach would be growling with the hunger of a growing predator, despite the fact that he was now physically capable of taking whatever he wanted through sheer force, would sit and wait and watch. Only when Thor finished, only when the Rottweiler moved away from his bowl and shook his head in the particular way that signaled completion, would Luna approach her own meal. And only when Luna finished would Atlas be allowed to eat. Sometimes Thor would make him wait longer than necessary just to reinforce the lesson. Sometimes Luna would leave scraps in her bowl, testing to see if Atlas would try to sneak them before receiving permission. He never did. The hierarchy was not negotiable. It was not open for discussion. It simply was, as fundamental as gravity, as unchangeable as the sunrise. The patrols happened twice daily, morning and evening, covering different sections of the sanctuary's vast territory. 2,000 hectares was too much ground for 1 man and 2 dogs to monitor effectively, but they did their best. Thor always led, his nose to the ground, his ears rotating like radar dishes, catching every sound the wilderness offered. Luna walked beside him, slightly offset, covering the flanks, and Atlas, massive and white and impossible to miss, walked behind them both. Not beside, not ahead, behind, the position of the pack member with lowest rank, the position that said, "I follow because that is my place and I accept it without question." Hendrik watched this formation every day and never stopped marveling at it. Here was a lion, an animal that in the wild would fear nothing except perhaps larger male lions and organized prides, walking in formation like a soldier, following commands, stopping when Thor stopped, changing direction when Luna changed direction. Alert to their cues, obedient to their body language, integrated so completely into canine pack structure that anyone watching would think they were seeing 3 large dogs rather than 2 dogs and a predator that could kill them both. But it was in the meals that the hierarchy became most obvious, most tested, most crucial to maintain. Lions are opportunistic feeders in the wild. They eat when food is available, gorge themselves, because they never know when the next meal might come. The instinct to eat first, to eat most, to guard food from others, is written into their genetic code with the indelibility of stone. And yet Atlas, day after day, week after week, month after month, suppressed that instinct. He waited. He watched Thor and Luna eat before touching his own food. And on the rare occasions when his control slipped, when hunger or instinct made him move toward the bowls before his turn, Thor did not need to attack or even threaten. A single low bark, sharp and commanding, would freeze Atlas in place. A look from Luna, steady and disappointed, would send him back to his sitting position, head lowered in shame, understanding that he had broken pack law and must be corrected. The play sessions were different. Here, Atlas was allowed more freedom, more expression of his natural physicality. Thor and Luna seemed to understand that a young lion needed to practice hunting behaviors, needed to develop the coordination and strength that would define his adult capabilities. They would engage him in mock battles, letting him pounce and roll and practice the motions that his DNA demanded. But even in play, there were rules. When Thor wanted to end the session, he would simply turn and walk away. If Atlas tried to continue, tried to jump on the Rottweiler's back or pull his tail, Thor would spin and bark once, sharp, final, and Atlas would stop, immediately, completely. The play was over, because Thor said it was over, and that was the end of the discussion. Luna was gentler in her play, more willing to be tackled, more patient with Atlas's sometimes clumsy attempts at stalking. She would let him chase her, let him think he was succeeding in hunting her, and then, at the last moment, she would dodge aside and Atlas would tumble past, confused but delighted. It was through these sessions that Luna taught Atlas perhaps the most important lesson of all, the one that would define his entire relationship with the pack. She taught him how to be gentle despite his strength, how to pull his punches, how to understand that his body was now a weapon and must be controlled with precision or risk hurting those he loved. There was a day when Atlas was 10 months old and weighed nearly 80 kilograms, when this lesson was tested in the most direct way possible. They were playing in the open area near Hendrik's quarters, Luna dodging and weaving while Atlas practiced his pouncing technique. He was getting better, faster, his natural feline grace beginning to emerge from the puppy-like clumsiness of youth. On one particular jump, he misjudged the distance. His paw, as large as a dinner plate and equipped with claws that extended to nearly 8 centimeters when unsheathed, caught Luna across the shoulder, not hard, not intentionally, but hard enough that she yelped and went down. Atlas froze. The playful energy drained from his body like water from a broken container. Luna was on the ground. Luna was hurt. Luna, who had licked him clean when he was dying, who had shared her warmth during those first desperate nights, who had taught him every important thing he knew about being part of something larger than himself, was bleeding from 4 shallow cuts across her shoulder where his claws had raked her flesh. Thor arrived before Atlas could even process what to do next. The big Rottweiler assessed the situation in seconds, saw Luna's injury, saw Atlas standing over her in frozen horror, and made a decision. He did not attack. That would have been the easy response, the instinctive one. Instead, he walked directly to Atlas and did something he had never done before. He put his paw on Atlas's head. Pressed down. Firm, but not violent. A physical command that said down. A gesture that said, submit now, because this is serious. And Atlas went down, collapsed to the ground as though his legs had been cut from beneath him, rolled to his side, exposed his throat and belly, the ultimate surrender, the deepest apology his body could offer. Only then did Thor turn his attention to Luna, sniffing her wound, licking it clean with the antiseptic quality of canine saliva. Luna, for her part, remained calm. The cuts were superficial, painful, but not dangerous. She looked past Thor to where Atlas lay on the ground, still frozen in his submissive posture, and something in her expression softened. She knew it had been an accident. She knew Atlas would never hurt her on purpose. But Thor's correction had been necessary anyway, because accidents could kill when you weighed as much as Atlas and possessed his natural weaponry. Hendrik, watching from the porch with his medical kit already in hand, saw the entire exchange and understood its significance. This was not about punishment. This was about making certain Atlas understood the consequences of his strength, that even unintentional harm required acknowledgement, apology, and renewed commitment to control. Luna eventually walked over to where Atlas still lay prostrate and touched her nose to his. Forgiveness granted. Atlas remained down for another several seconds before slowly, carefully, rising to his feet. For the rest of that day, he stayed at least 3 meters away from Luna, giving her space, showing through distance that he respected her, that he was sorry, that it would not happen again. And it did not. From that day forward, Atlas's control over his own body became extraordinary. When he played, his claws remained sheathed. When he pounced, he calculated force with mathematical precision. When he mouthed Luna's ears or neck in affection, he did so with such delicacy that she barely felt the pressure. He had learned that his body was a weapon, and weapons must be controlled absolutely, or they become liabilities rather than assets. By the time Atlas reached 1 year old, he weighed 120 kilograms and stood nearly as tall as a full-grown human at the shoulder. His mane was magnificent, golden and full, making his white face seem even more striking by contrast. He was, by any measure, a fully functional adolescent lion, and yet the hierarchy held. Thor remained Alpha, Luna remained Beta, Atlas remained Omega. The order of feeding had not changed. The formation during patrols had not varied. The response to commands was as instant at 1 year as it had been at 3 months, but adolescence in lions, like adolescence in any species, is a time of testing boundaries, of pushing against rules to see which ones are truly fixed and which ones might bend. Atlas began to test in small ways, taking 1 step forward during mealtime before being corrected, trying to walk beside Thor during patrols instead of behind, initiating play when Thor had indicated rest time. Nothing major, nothing that could be called rebellion, just tiny experiments in autonomy, and each time Thor and Luna corrected him, gently when possible, firmly when necessary, teaching him again and again that the hierarchy existed, not to diminish him, but to protect him, to give him structure, to make him part of something greater than any individual could be alone. There was a morning, early, when the compound was still wrapped in the blue twilight that precedes dawn. Hendrik had not yet emerged from his quarters. The sanctuary was quiet, except for the eternal sounds of Africa, the distant call of a fish-eagle, the rustle of wind through acacia trees, the buzz of insects preparing for the heat of day. Thor and Luna were on the porch, as they always were at this hour, waiting for Hendrik to begin the morning routine, and Atlas was with them, lying on his side, his massive body relaxed in sleep, or appearing to sleep. In reality, Atlas was watching through barely opened eyes as Thor rose, stretched, and walked to the edge of the porch to look out over the land. In that moment, with Thor's back turned, with Luna dozing, with no human supervision, Atlas could have done anything. He could have asserted dominance, could have challenged, could have used his superior size and strength to claim the alpha position. Every instinct he possessed, every drop of lion blood in his veins should have urged him toward this. The opportunity was perfect. The prize was available. All he needed to do was take it. Atlas rose slowly to his feet, walked quietly toward where Thor stood, got close enough to touch, and then, in a gesture that would have made no sense to any wild lion, Atlas lowered his head and rubbed it against Thor's shoulder, the feline gesture of affection, of trust, of family. Thor turned, looked at the giant white lion who could have been his death, and licked Atlas's ear. The moment passed. The hierarchy held, not because of force, not because of fear, but because love is stronger than instinct when love is taught early and reinforced with patience. Visitors to the sanctuary, when they saw the three of them together, often asked Hendrik if he was afraid of what Atlas might become, afraid that one day the lion would wake up and remember he was a predator. Hendrik's answer was always the same. Fear was not the right word. Respect, perhaps. Awareness, certainly. But Atlas was not a ticking bomb. He was a member of a pack who understood his place and accepted it not because he was forced to, but because it made sense to him. Because the alternative to hierarchy was chaos, and chaos meant losing the only family he had ever known. But even as Hendrik said these things, even as he believed them with most of his heart, there remained a small kernel of doubt, a whisper in the back of his mind that said nothing this impossible should work. That said, nature always wins eventually. That said, he was playing with forces he did not fully understand, and one day the bill would come due. He pushed these thoughts away during the daytime, during the busy hours of feeding and patrolling and managing the sanctuary, but at night in the darkness they returned, and he wondered. Atlas was now 18 months old, 160 kilograms of muscle and bone, and barely contained power. His roar, when he chose to use it, could be heard for 8 kilometers in every direction. His teeth were fully developed, capable of crushing vertebrae, of holding prey 10 times his size, of killing with surgical efficiency. And yet, he used that roar only rarely, usually in response to distant calls from wild lions whose territories bordered the sanctuary. And his teeth, those magnificent instruments of death, were employed primarily for eating the meat Hendrik provided and occasionally grooming Luna's fur when she permitted him close enough. The dynamic was stable, beautiful even. 3 animals who should have been incompatible living in harmony that defied every rule of nature. Hendrik documented it all, writing papers that he submitted to conservation journals, giving presentations to other wildlife managers, showing video footage that made biologists shake their heads in disbelief. This was not supposed to be possible. Lions were not social with other species. They did not accept pack hierarchy from non-lions. They did not suppress their dominance instincts indefinitely. And yet, here was Atlas, living proof that the impossible was merely improbable, not inevitable. And then, on a warm April morning when the sanctuary was painted gold with early sun, Hendrik noticed something about Luna, a subtle change in her behavior. She was eating more, seeking shade more frequently, staying closer to Thor than usual. Her abdomen, always lean and athletic, seemed slightly fuller. Her nipples, usually barely visible beneath her dark coat, appeared more prominent. Hendrik felt his stomach drop even before his mind fully processed what his eyes were telling him. He knew these signs, had seen them dozens of times in other animals. Luna was pregnant. He called her over, ran his hands along her sides, felt the subtle firmness that confirmed his suspicion. 6 weeks along, maybe 7. Which meant in another 3 weeks, possibly 4 at most, she would give birth to puppies, multiple puppies, tiny, helpless, squeaking puppies, in a compound where a 160-kilogram lion was part of the family. Hendrik looked across the yard to where Atlas was dozing in the morning sun, content and peaceful, his white coat brilliant against the red earth. And for the first time since bringing the cub home that desperate night so many months ago, Hendrik felt genuine fear coil in his gut like a living thing, because puppies triggered instincts. Puppies were prey-sized. Puppies made sounds that resembled distressed baby animals. And baby animals, in the logic of a predator's brain, were food, not family. Food. He had to make a decision. Separate them now, before the birth, and risk destroying the bond that had taken 18 months to build, or trust that bond was strong enough to override nature's most fundamental programming. Trust that Atlas would see Luna's puppies not as prey, but as pack, as family, as something to protect rather than consume. It was the biggest gamble Hendrik had ever faced, and he had no idea which choice would prove to be the right one. He only knew that in 3 weeks, possibly less, the answer would reveal itself, one way or another, in joy or in tragedy. The dice were already rolling, and there was no way to call them back. The meeting took place at midnight, because emergencies do not wait for convenient hours. Hendrik gathered his 3 senior staff members in the small conference room that doubled as equipment storage. Maria, his assistant of 12 years, who had helped bottle feed Atlas during those first desperate weeks. James, the head of sanctuary security, a former game ranger who had seen things most people could not imagine. And Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the veterinarian who traveled from Port Elizabeth twice monthly to check on the sanctuary's animals. The 4 of them represented decades of combined wildlife experience, and not one of them knew what to do about the situation that was now unavoidable. The options were written on a whiteboard in Hendrik's precise handwriting. Option 1, separate Atlas from Thor and Luna immediately before the birth. Create a temporary enclosure where the lion would remain until the puppies were old enough to defend themselves, perhaps 6 months. Pro, it eliminated any risk of predation. Con, it would likely traumatize all 3 animals and potentially destroy the bond that made this entire arrangement work. Option 2, attempt partial separation. Keep Atlas visible to the dogs, but physically divided by fencing or barriers. Pro, maintained some connection while ensuring safety. Con, Atlas had never been caged or confined in his life. The psychological impact could be devastating. Option 3, maintain status quo and trust the hierarchy. Pro, respected the relationships they had built. Con, risked the lives of newborn puppies if Atlas's instincts proved stronger than his learned behavior. Maria spoke first, her voice tight with emotion. Separate them, she said. It is not worth the risk. We cannot gamble with innocent lives. James nodded agreement, adding that he could construct a secure temporary enclosure in 48 hours, something humane but effective. Dr. Okonkwo said nothing for a long moment, her dark eyes thoughtful. Then she asked the question that changed everything. Have any of you actually watched Atlas interact with baby animals since he arrived? The room went quiet. Hendrik thought back through 18 months of observations. There had been that impala fawn, orphaned by a vehicle strike, that they had treated in the compound for a week before releasing. Atlas had been curious, but not aggressive. Had sniffed the fawn, made a rumbling sound that was more purr than growl, then walked away, disinterested. There had been the nest of baby vervet monkeys whose mother was killed by a leopard. Hendrik had briefly brought them through the compound while transporting them to a primate rehabilitation center. Atlas had watched, but not approached, had shown no hunting behavior whatsoever. And more recently, there was the injured jackal pup they had nursed back to health. Atlas had actually seemed protective of it, positioning himself between the pup and Thor when the big Rottweiler's patience ran thin during feeding time. Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward. I'm not saying there is no risk, she said carefully. I'm saying that Atlas has had 18 months of consistent reinforcement that small, vulnerable creatures are not prey, that everything in this compound is pack or under-pack protection. His behavior has been remarkably stable. Separating him now might actually create more problems than it solves. If he perceives the separation as rejection, as punishment for something he did not do, the psychological damage could be permanent. We might destroy the very trust that would keep the puppies safe. Maria started to object, but Hendrik raised his hand. He had been thinking the same thing, but had been afraid to voice it, afraid that wanting to believe in the impossible was clouding his judgment. But Dr. Okonkwo was right. Atlas had shown no predatory interest in small animals, ever. Not once, in 18 months. Was that enough evidence to gamble on? He did not know, could not know, would only know when the moment arrived, and by then it would be too late to change the decision. They voted. Maria for separation, James for separation, Dr. Okonkwo for maintaining status quo. Hendrik held the deciding vote, and the weight of it pressed on him like physical force. He thought about Atlas, about the tiny, dying cub he had found in the darkness, about the trust those gold eyes showed every time the lion looked at him, about Thor and Luna, who had taught this predator to be family, about the risk and the reward and the impossible balance between them. And he cast his vote. "We keep them together," he said quietly. "We monitor constantly. We have tranquilizer guns ready, but we trust what we have built. We trust the pack." The days that followed were surreal with tension. Luna's pregnancy progressed normally, her body changing to accommodate the lives growing within her. Thor became more vigilant, more protective, staying closer to her than usual. And Atlas behaved in ways that made even Hendrik's decision seem reasonable. The lion became gentle to the point of comedy. When Luna rested, Atlas rested nearby. When she ate, he waited even longer than usual to approach his own food, as though sensing she needed extra resources now. When she walked, he followed at a greater distance than normal, giving her space but remaining close enough to respond if needed. Most remarkably, Atlas stopped playing rough with Thor entirely. The two still interacted, but now their exchanges were limited to grooming and resting in proximity. It was as though Atlas understood, through some intuition that transcended language, that Luna needed protection and rest, and anything that might upset the established calm was unacceptable. Hendrik documented this behavior obsessively, taking notes, recording videos, trying to find precedent in the scientific literature, and finding none. Lions did not behave this way. They just did not. And yet here was Atlas, rewriting the rules with every passing day. The birth happened on a Thursday night, 3 weeks after that midnight meeting. Luna had been restless all day, pacing, refusing food, seeking dark corners. Classic signs of impending labor. Hendrik stayed home from the evening patrol, keeping watch. Thor remained glued to Luna's side, his anxiety obvious in every line of his body. And Atlas positioned himself 10 meters away, lying down but alert, his eyes tracking Luna's every movement. As the sun set and darkness claimed the compound, Luna retreated to the small storage building that backed against the main residence. It was cool there, private, with clean blankets Hendrik had laid down in anticipation of this moment. Thor followed her inside. And Atlas, after a moment's hesitation, tried to follow as well. Thor appeared in the doorway immediately, blocking it, a deep growl rumbling from his chest. No, not now, not yet. This was too important, too vulnerable a moment to risk any unpredictability. Atlas stopped, stared at Thor, and for several heartbeats, Hendrik thought this might be the moment when everything fell apart, when Atlas decided his size and strength meant he did not have to accept Thor's prohibition. When 18 months of carefully maintained hierarchy crumbled under the pressure of natural curiosity. But then, Atlas did something that made Hendrik's eyes sting with unexpected emotion. The lion lay down, right there, outside the storage building door, pressed his body flat to the earth in the ultimate gesture of non-threat, and stayed there, waiting, watching, accepting Thor's decision without challenge. The labor took 3 hours. 3 hours during which Hendrik sat on the porch with a tranquilizer rifle across his lap and his heart in his throat. 3 hours during which Atlas did not move from his position, did not eat, did not sleep, simply maintained vigil like a guard on duty. 3 hours that felt like 3 years, And then, finally, sounds emerged from the storage building that changed everything. The high-pitched mewing cries of newborn puppies, 4 distinct voices, overlapping, demanding, alive. Thor emerged first, his muzzle wet from licking the pups clean, his eyes bright with something that looked almost like pride. He walked directly to Atlas, touched his nose to the lion's nose in a gesture of greeting and perhaps gratitude for respecting the boundary. Then he moved aside, and after a moment, Luna appeared in the doorway. She looked exhausted, her coat matted with birth fluids, her sides heaving with exertion, but her tail wagged, slowly, tiredly, but undeniably. She was telling Atlas specifically that everything was all right, that he could approach, that he was allowed. Atlas rose from his position with a care that seemed almost religious. He moved toward the doorway with steps so slow and measured that he barely seemed to be moving at all. Hendrik's finger rested on the tranquilizer rifle's trigger, his breath coming shallow and fast. This was the moment. This was when they would know if 18 months of teaching and trust had been enough. Atlas reached the doorway, lowered his massive head to peer inside, and Hendrik saw in the dim light 4 tiny shapes huddled against Luna's belly. 2 males and 2 females, black and rust-coated, perfect, helpless, completely vulnerable. Atlas took 1 step inside. Luna watched but did not move, did not warn him away. Thor circled behind the lion, close enough to intervene if necessary, but not blocking his path. Atlas took another step, another, until he stood directly over Luna and her newborns, his body so large he could have covered all of them like a blanket. He lowered his head further, sniffing each puppy individually, learning their scent, cataloging their presence in whatever way a lion's mind processes such information. One of the puppies, the boldest of the males who would later be named Bolt, mewed loudly and began to squirm away from his mother's warmth. His tiny legs pumped uselessly, his sealed eyes providing no guidance, his entire world reduced to smell and touch and instinct. He crawled directly toward Atlas's front paw, drawn perhaps by warmth, perhaps by size, perhaps by nothing more than random chance. Hendrik felt his heart stop. The puppy was climbing onto the lion's paw, using those razor claws, currently sheathed but always present, as handholds to pull his 800-gram body upward. Atlas froze, did not pull his paw away, did not shake the puppy off, simply remained absolutely motionless while this creature, small enough to fit in a human palm, climbed his leg, climbed his chest, climbed until it reached the thick mane around Atlas's neck and burrowed into that forest of golden fur with a satisfied squeak. Finding, perhaps, the warmth it sought. Finding safety in the most impossible place imaginable, in the mane of a predator who could have ended its life with a single twitch of muscle. Hendrik realized he was crying only when the tears reached his chin. Luna watched this interaction with calm acceptance, then returned her attention to the other 3 puppies, beginning to clean them more thoroughly. Thor settled down beside her, his body providing warmth to the little family. And Atlas, moving with infinite slowness and care, lowered himself to the ground, positioning his body in a curve around Luna and Thor and the puppies, a living wall of protection, a guardian, not a threat, never a threat, always and forever, family. The weeks that followed rewrote everything Hendrik thought he knew about animal behavior. The puppies, named Bolt, Shadow, Freya and Zara, grew rapidly on Luna's milk and the supplemental feeding Hendrik provided. By 2 weeks old, their eyes opened, revealing the blue-gray color all puppies are born with before their adult pigmentation develops. By 3 weeks, they were walking, wobbling and unsteady, but mobile. And from the moment they could move independently, they treated Atlas like terrain to be explored. The lion became their favorite climbing structure. They would scramble over his back, slide down his sides, chew on his tail, pull his ears, and use his mane as a nest for afternoon naps. Atlas tolerated all of it with patience that bordered on saintly. When Shadow bit too hard on his ear, hard enough to draw blood, Atlas did not even flinch. He simply looked at Luna as though asking for help with discipline. Luna would then intervene, correcting Shadow with a sharp bark, teaching her children the boundaries they needed to respect. There was a morning when Freya wandered too far from the designated safe area, drawn by the fascinating movement of a butterfly. She was 5 weeks old, brave and curious, and not yet wise enough to recognize danger. Atlas noticed her absence before either Thor or Luna did. Without a sound, without seeking permission, he rose and walked after the puppy. When he reached her, perhaps 20 meters from the compound, he did something extraordinary. He picked her up by the scruff of her neck, the same way a mother lion would carry her own cub, and walked her back to safety. His massive jaws, capable of crushing bone, closed around her tiny body with such delicacy that Freya did not even whimper. She simply dangled, content to be carried, trusting completely in the creature who held her life between his teeth. When Atlas deposited Freya back in the safe zone, Thor approached. For a moment, Hendrik thought the Rottweiler might discipline Atlas for moving a puppy without permission. But instead, Thor did something remarkable. He licked Atlas's muzzle, the canine gesture of approval, of gratitude, of respect. Atlas had done the right thing, had protected a pack member, had acted not as a predator, but as an uncle, as family. And Thor's lick was acknowledgement of that. But perhaps the most telling moment came when the puppies were 8 weeks old, large enough to begin learning boundaries and social rules. Zara, the most stubborn of the four, was chewing on a piece of equipment she had dragged from the storage area. Thor barked at her to stop. She ignored him. He barked again, louder, more authoritative. She continued chewing, her baby teeth making small puncture marks in the expensive gear. Thor looked frustrated, uncertain how to enforce discipline on a puppy who seemed determined to ignore pack hierarchy. Atlas, watching from his usual position in the shade, rose to his feet. He walked over to where Zara was destroying the equipment, and he produced a sound from deep in his chest. Not quite a roar, not quite a growl. Something in between, a rumble that carried authority and mild warning but no aggression. Zara's head snapped up. Her ears went back. She dropped the equipment immediately and ran back to Luna, understanding on an instinctual level that when the giant white creature made that sound, you obeyed. You obeyed right now. Thor looked at Atlas. Atlas looked back, and in that exchange, something shifted. Thor was still alpha. That had not changed. But Atlas had just proven he understood pack discipline, could enforce it appropriately, could be trusted with the younger members. He was not just a member of the pack anymore. He was a guardian of it, an uncle, a protector. And Thor's slight tail wag said he recognized and appreciated this role. By 3 months old, the puppies weighed 12 kilograms each and had been weaned from Luna's milk. They were rambunctious, energetic, constantly testing boundaries and exploring their world. And their favorite playmate, their favorite climbing structure, their favorite source of warmth on cold nights was Atlas. The lion who should have been their death became their security. They slept piled on top of him. They chased his tail during play sessions. They tried to copy his behaviors, walking behind him during patrols in a comical line of much smaller bodies, attempting to mirror his stride. The sanctuary's visitors, when they were allowed brief observations from a distance, could not believe what they were seeing. A white lion being mobbed by Rottweiler puppies. A predator whose species had no business interacting peacefully with canines, surrounded by them, accepting their presence, protecting them. Social media posts showing brief videos of the interactions went viral. News organizations requested interviews. Conservation groups wanted to study this unprecedented dynamic. But Hendrik limited access carefully. This was not a zoo exhibit. This was a family, and families deserve privacy. The final scene that captures everything this story means happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Hendrik woke early, walked outside to begin the morning routine and stopped dead in his tracks. The sight before him was so perfect, so impossible, that he ran back inside to get his camera before his rational mind could convince him it was not real. In the open area before his quarters, 7 figures moved in formation. Thor in front, his head high, leading the way. Luna beside him, matching his pace. Atlas behind them both, maintaining his position as Omega, despite now weighing 210 kilograms of pure predatory power. And behind Atlas, trying their best to copy the formation, 4 Rottweiler puppies. Bolt, Shadow, Freya, and Zara. Walking in a line, stopping when the adults stopped, turning when the adults turned. Learning through observation and osmosis what it meant to be part of a pack. Hendrik watched them patrol the compound perimeter, this impossible family, this living contradiction of everything biology said should be true. Thor, the 55-kilogram Rottweiler who commanded the respect of an animal 4 times his size, through nothing but confidence and consistent leadership. Luna, who had trusted this predator with her newborn children and been proven right beyond measure. Atlas, who possessed the strength to destroy everything he loved, but chose instead to protect it, to serve it, to accept a place at the bottom of the hierarchy, because love is more powerful than dominance. And 4 puppies who would grow up never doubting that the giant white lion was their uncle, their protector, their family. That evening, as the sun painted the African sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Hendrik sat on his porch and watched his family settle down for rest. Thor and Luna on their usual beds, the puppies piled together nearby, and Atlas, massive and magnificent, lying in a curve around all of them. A living fortress, a guardian who would give his life to protect these creatures who had given him a reason to live. Hendrik picked up his journal and wrote the final entry in a documentation project that had spanned 18 months. He wrote about hierarchy and love, about nature and nurture, about the boundaries we believe are fixed until someone comes along and proves them flexible. He wrote about a white lion cub who should have died alone in the darkness, but instead became part of something impossible, something beautiful, something that proved beyond doubt that family is not about species or size or strength. Family is about who teaches you, who accepts you, who stands beside you when standing is hard, and who you choose to protect when protecting requires everything you have to give. Family is a white lion obeying 2 dogs, not because he fears them, but because he loves them. Family is 4 puppies sleeping on a predator's back without concern because they have never known anything but gentleness from him. Family is choice, not biology. Love, not instinct. And sometimes, when the stars align and courage meets patience and trust overcomes fear, family is absolutely everything.